Guys, I'm very happy to welcome Igor. And just a quick introduce Igor. Igor is a entrepreneur and underdog in media world, and I'm super proud talking to him because I really like to bring people with interesting flair who able to apply this startup spirit and just go bottom up from basically 0 to 1 mentality. Although I've heard in your previous podcast that 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel is not the book that you would recommend to anyone due to some particularities. But let's kick it off basically with your story. How did you land in Berlin, and why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me here. It's my first online podcast, so I'm really looking excited to see how it's gonna go. Yeah, so how I've ended up in Berlin, very typical story. I did my political science degree in Slovenia, and then I wanted to explore a bit more. I never had Erasmus experience. And then I did an MBA here in Berlin, and after that, they told us you should have an internship here in Germany because it's easier for you to get a job, right? So then I said, okay. And then I got an internship in Stuttgart, and since then I'm here. So then first I spent I think like 7 to 8 years in this very corporate job, and then I went back to Berlin where I also studied, and I'm here in Berlin since 2 years. Yeah.
Well, when I look at your LinkedIn, the first block is dominated by Mercedes in Stuttgart. And um, if you compare work and the culture environment from Mercedes to what you experience on a day to day in Berlin and like startups or basically every company that try to raise up, what is the main difference?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the main difference is because Mercedes or Daimler or whichever of these big companies, they just have so much more strict or so much bigger stakeholder management processes, right? So if you want to achieve something, if you want to change something, you always need to align much more with your stakeholders, and this is maybe not so common in startups, in smaller companies where you can just basically execute, right? So you get an idea, and next day you say, okay, your boss says let's do it, and then you're doing it, right? So that's a bit of a difference. And also another one is that these big companies, they have a lot of specialists. So you're a small wheel, you are basically just responsible for one topic, while in smaller companies you're going to obviously wear many more hats. So I would say that's the main difference: is first the stakeholder management, and second then also these hats, which are just more, it's more dynamic environment in smaller companies, right? Which just doesn't mean that the other one is worse or this one is better. It's just a bit what you prefer personally.
Igor, when I look at you and I look at your story, and I mean many guys who would um, look up at your profile later on, they will realize that why I give so much attention to your personality. Like I describe you as a persona who is really pushing like bottom up. And when you mention in the corporate world you're wearing I don't know one hat, but in the startup you need to wear similar hats. So in your description, like you are data driven product guy. You also mentioned that at some point you were learning Python to be closer to data. You are trained to be basically a political scientist, so you know how to talk. So basically communication skill needs to be polished to the level that you call yourself a professional. So which of these hats are like really needed nowadays to promote yourself and become an entrepreneur?
I think all these things obviously help, right? If you can talk, then you get invited to podcast, then you can expand your audience. If you can do data analysis, if you have bases, if you know how the databases are built, then it's much easier to build different products. So I think if you, and also now with Gen AI, what's coming, it can also help you to get so many more ideas. So I feel like everything what I did, all the experience that I did is just making you more complete. So I always understood myself as a very good generalist. I'm really bad in specialist or specializing myself. So this obviously now all this path, which basically it accidentally happened that I'm not trying to build sort of media company out of Handpicked Berlin, but all of this then somehow helped. Yeah. And it's very hard to say now, So I think my main quality is basically this one, that I'm a generalist. So this also at work, it helped me because I had so many different experience from different types of, either it was data governance or data itself, or data models or whatever. So this also then helped me. And when I'm now talking with some of my partners or people that I want to work with, so my level of discussion is just so much better, just because I touched so many things in my career path, right? So I basically did so many different things that suddenly I can just somehow have a bit of smart questions to every topic, and that's what I think it's valuable.
Well, I love how you run your um, media empire, so to say. Because it's not just handpicked. So for the record, handpicked is the newsletter specifically tailored for job market and the newest trends, where Igor is trying to also publish, like, handpicked companies, what they're looking for, what the trends are, what is the median salary in Berlin, and many, many more interesting topics. But to build an audience, what I love, like, you always pick these super cool topics, throw on top of that, and let people like vote or poll. And So my follow-up question would be, you know, why this topic, like, you know, uh, newsletter format, or
Yeah.
because you've experimented quite a lot before, right?
Yeah, so basically, I was a typical this startup guy. Sorry, corporate guy wants to be a startup guy. Yeah, so I had some money. So luckily, I didn't buy a freelancer to build an app, right? So that was the first mistake that I didn't do. And then through this time, I realized at that time there was no AI, so I couldn't do apps myself, right? So I was basically dependent on my own skills, because with finding co-founders is extremely hard. So I then just said, okay, what can I now do myself? And basically, a newsletter is a typical thing, right? So I started, just like you said, just collecting jobs, and mainly at the beginning, Handpicked Berlin was just a collection of jobs with some funding news. And then with time, it really evolved. And then I start to realize that people also like this sort of small commentary that I'm adding. And then I start to realize they like it this even more. So now it's evolved into sort of commentary on certain topics, community support. So it grew out of this basic. I just had an idea. I'm just gonna collect some jobs and send them around and see what happens, right? So then, eventually, also my interest. For example, if I'm in the last issue, we had about a poll about tap water, right? Are you drinking tap water or not? Which is so random, but actually I realized people really like it, so I always try to add a bit of stuff that is interesting to me. And I think that's also the future of the media, is that these independent curators, they will take over the role that editors in big media houses had before, right? So you're going to say, okay, I like these curators and I want them to feed me some content that they find interesting. And that's exactly how I'm thinking, because I read really a lot. So I'm subscribed to many newsletters. I have many different sources, and each time when I'm in the morning, when I have my ritual reading, I'm thinking, okay, this could be interesting for my subscribers, or this could be interesting. And then I just collect this information, and then I try to push it in an interesting way. And the same is, for example, like you mentioned, trends. Right now, everyone is talking about Gen AI. So obviously, I'm interested. What does this mean? How can I add some value to people reading me, that they can go out and check other links so they can form their own opinion. But of course, I always like to push my own opinion, or attach it. Yeah, so I think that's what makes it a bit interesting, and that's why it's also very hard to do, because in order to make a good quality newsletter, you need to really curate it well, especially if you're just sending out a collection of links, like in my case. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's a format that I came across first. I think a friend of you, Andrew, I forgot his surname, but he runs 20% newsletter. And the second most known to me, at least, is actually Handpicked. I don't know how did you guys cross-reference each other, but at some point I discovered your newsletter. I subscribed to that, and with subscription, I also subscribe to any other stuff that you populate in the media. So it's a um, YouTube, it's Instagram. I mean, I don't know, like, what else do you consider outlets for?
Hmm.
your productions. How do you believe the whole media changed or will change in the future with like what we see and what will come?
I think so. The main problem is if you look at the regular newspapers, right? The amount of newspapers that they sell in print really dropped. So basically, internet killed the classical media, which is especially true for newspapers. And these old media houses, they have a problem because they have a lot of staff, right? They are very big, and they need to still somehow survive. And especially in smaller markets, like from in my home Slovenia, there is a terrible disaster in the newspaper business as a business, right? So basically, media houses started to struggle because of Google, because of Facebook, of all this. And I think now is exactly the moment where it will become very interesting for independent, solo, or very small teams, because with all the technology, you can do so much more, and you can then basically build this small media businesses without any big cost, because you basically can run a newsletter. I mean, newsletters are like the blogs of 2000s or early internet times. And now you can see, you found me through 20%, but besides my newsletter, now in Berlin alone, I know there's 50 other newsletters. So basically, newsletters are the new blogs, and the distribution is also very interesting because email is a very private thing, right? You carry it everywhere, right? Wherever you go, it's much more worth than a follower on Instagram, or a follower somewhere else, because email is in your inbox. I mean, if you are not in the promotion tab, you are with your most important emails, and I'm basically, me and others are now competing for your personal attention, and there's a lot of people competing for this attention, including old media. And it's a very interesting momentum now. And I think also newsletters are a bit hyped now. There's a lot of newsletters, so there might be something coming. But what's interesting is that email is really basically the only remaining unique identifier that's left, right? Besides the phone number. But email is, I have my email since 20 years. Yeah, I mean, I was shocked to see on Gmail when they said, oh, you could lose history of 20 years the other day. I was like, wow, this is really a long time, right? So my Gmail is a single identifier for me. I moved from Slovenia to here, is still with me. It will still be there with so many years. So it's a very interesting medium. And I think that's what's going to now happen, that you're going to find a lot of very, very good independent curators doing the newsletters. Could be very niche, could be bigger, and then there will be this competition between all these newsletters for your personal attention, and that's what we are doing, yeah, all of us.
It's super interesting because like you know, being an engineer, I always look at this from different perspectives. So every time we are commissioned to build a new service or an app, you start with identity management. So you build this sign in, sign up, and it starts with okay, the easiest, the mechanism is basically you put your email and password because email is obviously the most common identifier on the market. So we don't care about name and surname. We just want to have an email. But uh, what you're talking about is like a lot deeper. What you're saying, like like the competition for email is going to be a lot more fearful than competition for follower. I've never thought about that, and now it totally opens my eyes. Okay, now I understand why every time I visit the e-commerce site, they say subscribe to our post and get €10 discount or 10% discount. So you instantly put the
Mm.
value for your email, and like we never thought about this before. And my question, follow-up question, isn't that super counter-effective then? Because when you visit different links, media, most of the time you get this paywall. Say you want to read it, whatever, pay us $5 subscription. I never do that. I don't know. I never do it because like it's maybe like my modern approach that like I don't want to pay for something that I don't know if it's gonna give me value in the future. L By giving email to you, I have the power to unsubscribe in any moment. So I don't know why media don't change that strategy by, I don't know, like giving the content for free without like a paywalls upfront.
I mean, they're trying this. You see, like they are. Everyone is now in the. I think not everyone, but a lot of companies are now in the game of newsletters. Like you said, this promotion, right? Give me 10 euros discount if you subscribe. All the shops have emails, but there is a main difference is the open rate, right? So and filters in Gmail. All this means that, for example, if now H&M sends you a promotional email for some shirts or whatever, I mean, the likelihood of you opening, I mean, I don't know now the exact details, but maybe there would be 5% open rates, right? And then what is makes a difference with successful newsletters is that you are hitting 50% up. I mean, this is really good open rates where people say, I see now this email and therefore I will open it. So you need to always add a lot of value. And I personally do pay for some newsletters, because also newsletters have this paid model sometimes. And I usually pay if I really believe that this person is giving me a lot of added value, right? So I personally also had a paid model at some point, but then I realized I myself wouldn't pay for it. So I want to now stop doing it, because I always felt that I'm not really doing enough for these people who are paying. So I would imagine I would be personally willing to pay if I would really receive some extreme added value from this particular newsletter. And this could be like an analysis. And for example, I also pay for The Economist as the only newspaper that or magazine that I am a subscriber, just because I believe they deliver so much added value to my life. Yeah. So I think that's me. And I think anyway, this paying for content, I mean, in Slovenia, not gonna be now proud of this, but everyone was torrenting, right, in the past, right? This was, and then with Netflix, with all this, it became a bit. I mean, the industry then successfully shifted to these subscription models, but now everyone wants you to subscribe to something for 10 euros. So now everyone is like, okay, hold on, I can't be subscribed to 50 things, right? It's gonna be, I don't know, a couple of €100 a month. So now it's again, I think it's shifting again. So I decided definitely for free model, and I will continue with this, because simply because I don't feel I add enough added value that I would now ask to. And also, like if I would have 100, 200, 300 paid subscribers, this also wouldn't significantly change my life. So that's, but yeah, this way, why pay? Why not pay? I don't know. But the main thing is now back to the subscriber numbers. I don't know now, I can't quote exactly, but there was this data engineer who had all the channels, TikTok, Instagram, course. Basically, he was selling courses, and he went really big on all the channels, like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, because he once published his salary development in San Francisco guy. I don't remember his name. And he said at some point that one email is worth 5 followers. So if you have 10,000 emails, this is equivalent to 50,000 followers on Instagram or Twitter or probably YouTube. So it's a bit of the value of email, especially if it's open rates attached, right? If you just have, I don't know, fake subscribers, this is also not worth anything, because everyone will ask you, what's your open rates, what's your click-through rates? So yeah.
And what's considered good open rate?
I mean, based on industry benchmarks, for example, for commercial email, it's maybe 5% is already okay. But for me, I'm now between 53 and 57%.
Mhm.
So like if you would have 60% open rates, that's impressive. That's really, really good. So whatever it's above 50% is already extremely good. I think whatever is between 30 and 50 is already okay. But it also depends what if you would be now selling. I don't know, e-commerce, and you would have 50%, this would be amazing. This would be crazy, right? So if it's more like advertising stuff, then it's, I think the rates up to 5% is already there. They are happy with it.
Is that do you consider like channels that you built leaning toward entertainment or general like news outlet? Like how do you because like you have both type of content, and I guess it's like one cannot exist without the other.
I mean, I have my main channels are LinkedIn, Instagram, and email. And I realized that for Instagram to be, I'm not really successful on Instagram because I don't have enough time with my full-time job to create reels, etc. But obviously, the model for Instagram would be infotainment, right? So I would need to give advice to people how to learn German, how to get the job, how to improve
Hmm.
CV. And they like it if you talk, right? If you just make some slides, nobody cares. Like I noticed this difference when you start to publish your selfies. I mean, it's stupid, but it works, right? If it's like you see this on LinkedIn all the time, right? A selfie and then everyone is playing the same book. So I think for Instagram, especially if it's this creation topic, needs to be infotainment, something funny, but also something interesting that people can learn. So if you see what's successful on social media is funny stuff, it's educational stuff, yeah. And educational also needs to be in a different way educational. I'm not gonna be lecturing there. And yeah, so then that's my main things is then basically the newsletter each week, and then I also want to create more content, sort of timeless content, which means articles that are people can use for reference at any point, right? Like for example, how to learn German. This was a very big hit because people are interested, right? Or like I mean, I have a lot of ideas, but again, not enough time. So I'm my main idea is to create a lot of content and then repurpose this content on the different media channels. Because you can, based on one article, you can then create a lot of reels, for example, if you are into that. Yeah,
I love the term that you coined, uh, timeless timeless content. I mean, it's basically archive that you could track back in time, and it's going to be always relevant because it's always like bind to specific episode of time. I mean, like just an example with your salary median salary survey, right? Like any time and time in the future, you could look back and say, okay, this year the median was this amount. Like this is like proven. We've done a research, so it's not just like blah blah blah.
yeah,
But by the way, like even in Instagram, like you have some successful reels. I've just looked at 5 minutes ago before the we start talking. You have like 122K views for a suggestion that if you want to be successful in looking for a job, you need to, like, I don't know, be an engineer, but apply not in Germany, not in this like hubs where the competition for resources have super fierce. Just go to whatever midtown where they still have some kind of IT jobs, but you're going to be a superstar there
yeah.
anyway.
Of course, if under this condition that you are want to live in a in a small city in Germany, yeah. But yes, this is also one of the outliers, right? So usually, and that's exactly the thing. Once you get this big 100,000 reel, then you start to get addicted to it, right? So you're looking great. It's all these likes, all these views, and that's this hype that then a lot of people get caught in because once you have this experience, you want to repeat it. And then I think I'm now also wow excited. Okay, let's try some new because the clip was actually from a podcast, right? So I didn't create it. I just talked, and then Luardo created it from Guten Tag podcast.
Yeah, I've know. Well, what I do with my podcast is also like a timeless content because at some point in time, we will look back and you will see, okay, I had 8,000 subscribers newsletter, and now I have, I don't know, 80,000 or 800,000. So it basically gives you always reference in time. And when I try to talk to engineers, and by the way, with engineers, I mainly use this podcast as a self-learning tool. When I explore the new technology and I'm not very familiar and I read but would like to get like first view approach on specific technology, I invite people on podcasts and they openly talk about that. So this is how I learn as well. The same thing I'm now learning about the media metrics and some insights about the media. And people say to me, "Oh, actually, it works pretty well as a backup for my portfolio because people then look for my name and they see the YouTube. They started to watch, and they only throughout long format you're able to open up some interesting ideas. And back to ideas that you might have or will have. Um, like I was an egoist, or I'm still an egoist, like in my mind, thinking if you want to be successful in Berlin, you want to be an engineer. So if you know how to code already, kind of, I don't know, many doors will open. But I think this year it's been kind of like a wake up call for many people because we realize that it doesn't give you anything. Right now with AI tools, anyone could pretty much code and compile some basic stuff. What really matters is what you mentioned before, also in one of your talks, is ability to validate your idea through any channels. And the best way to validate it is to build your own channel. So theoretically, if you have an audience of 8,000 people, you could ask a question about some of the most crazy idea that you would have, and you will have a social validation for idea, and then you could use this to build a business.
Yeah. And actually, this is one from the Zero to One book, right? I think Thiel talks about distribution, that you need to own your distribution channel, because that's usually the problem, right? Startups, they build a product and then they need to distribute it, and that's where they burn a lot of money on marketing. So I start to really quickly understand when I was on my sabbatical trying to build these apps, whatever, as a former corporate guy. I realized really quickly how important the audience is, and now like I can do stupid poll about tap water, right? It's not like I'm gonna do tap water business, but it's just once you build the audience, then you are able to distribute the ideas. And it's always been ideas are very cheap, right? The problem is usually the execution. I mean, this I see all the time with people, with myself. Like I have 1,000 ideas, but to execute something, it's a different beast. So I think I mean, software. There was all about software engineering last 15 years. Yeah, if you would ask me 10 years ago or 5 years ago what to do, be a software engineer, and now I mean, it's a bit bizarre, but there is this. I think the times will never come back where software engineers were the cool kids in the block, right? Just walking around, jobs hitting them basically on LinkedIn from all the sides, right? Like you have 10, no problem, 10 recruiters calling me each moment. So I think this will now significantly calm down. And one thing is because existing engineers will be so much faster with Gen AI as these assistants, right? They will be. I mean, you as a good engineer, you will be able to be really, really more productive, which means there will be less work to be done in one way or another. So I think that the software jobs, but maybe I'm completely wrong. Like we will see, they plateaued in this low interest environment, and this was also now I just had it in the last newsletter, this chart from the US, and I think the situation is maybe we have a bit of a lag, but situation will be the same in Europe. So I think now software is still very important, but I think it's not going to be so hyped anymore ever again. I feel that's at least my feeling. I don't know how you feel about this.
I I tend to agree. I tend to agree, and I when I talk to my fellow engineers, uh, I tell them that in the midterm, the only thing that could make a difference for you in your career is communication skill. Because right now already, if you compare engineer versus super good engineer, is the one who is able to basically convey idea across by communicating better, but not necessarily coding better. And I must tell you that like already now when I'm doing code interviews, uh, we used to do like this code challenges. So you would describe your challenge, and then you would let people take the challenge home and come back in a couple of weeks, and then you would analyze this challenge. And I can't do this anymore because I've realized that people using the Copilot and ChatGPT, and they're polishing up the challenge so well that I feel stupid looking at this. I'm like, oh my god, like, am I? How could this brilliant engineer could not be hired? And then I just realized that it wasn't his work. It's basically there are tools that make it profoundly better than human. But when it comes to communicating idea across, like, do we need to, I don't know, build this or not to build this, or basically, there are other ways, is still in a scarce. So like we and but I think going one step further, I think what everyone is missing nowadays, or not missing, but what we need to work on is curiosity. I mean, like, this is what, again, like, this is why we're talking, because not only you generalist, but you're generally curious. You want to change something. You want to you want to move from point A to point B and D. And so, what drives you? Like, where do you get your energy? What wakes you up in the morning?
Wow, that's a deep question. So I think ultimately I now came to this stage where I now also opened a small company right next to my job. And when I start to see, okay, how can I now, what can I now do? How can I bring this to next level? What other projects can I do? So my ultimate goal is to be independent, right? Not to be a salary man anymore. And since I can't be the one who is I'm even with ChatGPT, even with my basic Python skills, I'm not gonna be able to have very complicated applications that I will build. But what I realize is I can bring different people together and we can build some stuff, right? So, for example, for the salaries trends survey, first year I did it myself with a bit of a help from some colleagues. And this year, I just asked in the newsletter who wants to help, and bam, four volunteers. And one helped me with the data ingestion, the other one helped me with visualization, and the result is so much better. So I'm now saying, okay, if I have other product ideas, I'm now connecting with people. Ultimately, because when you build something or try to work with someone, it also works or it doesn't work. It will never be an easy way, right, to work with others. But what I'm now just going to do is I'm so curious to explore what else is possible and connect with basically my subscribers because they raise their hands. I want to try this, I want to try that. And then you meet a couple of times, you start something like, is it either events, it's small projects, and then you see out of 5 people or 10 people, maybe with 2 of them, it's really good, right? So let's continue, let's do something else. Because I realize that so many people want to do some stuff. Yeah. So if I like to have ideas and then try to, because initially I was thinking I'm going to do this solopreneurship, right? But then
Mhm.
I listened to a podcast. I'm not really a big podcast guy, but I listened to this one and it was extremely good. It was with Daniel Priestley and Ali Abdal, and he says this entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, he said, "Listen, solopreneurship is a stupid idea because once you go on holiday, the business stops." So I said, "Okay, that's a very good point. So I don't
Mhm.
want to do that." And yeah, now I'm just basic. What drives me is that I want to try different stuff with different people, and the same time get to this magical 10,000 subscribers, and then try to get some advertising deals, learn how to sell, because I'm not really good in sales. I'm very good in creating content, but this part I still need to learn. So yeah, it's just basically advancing my own skills and go on podcasts like I'm now, see
Mhm.
what's gonna happen. Just embrace the journey. And what drives me is mainly that people like it, right? Because each time I do it, each Monday when I send a newsletter, I get unsubscribers, but I also get new people each week. And then I'm interested. Yeah, what else I can give them? What will happen? What other content I can do? So this is a very process that I really much enjoy, and yeah, somehow I still enjoy it. So I will do it until I enjoy it.
Well, Igor, actually, what you describe is still comes down to ability to communicate better, communicate or communicate in a way to that your communication style attracts people, attracts to your idea, so that you could create a project or in a later stage movement that people want to follow you. And this is what we describe as a single most important job of a CEO, to bring idea across in a way that invokes curiosity, and people want to basically realize their own dreams through your outlet, so you become an outlet.
Hmm.
And um, you've mentioned that you also go to some events, and I think you've organized some kind of like offline event where you actually meet people who could help you then later on.
Yeah,
Could you give us some tips, like for all the introverts?
yeah. So this is a really tough one because I mean, in Berlin, there's loads of events, loads of meetups, and I'm not in general a big fan. I'm not going often, so you need to be really careful to which ones you go. But I mean, if you are introvert, I think the easiest way is to just put yourself out there and go to some, and then you can say, okay, I'm gonna go to, I don't know. You need to pick a bit obviously on your interest, and then you go there, and maybe you can say, as an introvert, you can say, okay, this time I'm going to try to approach one person myself, right? Because usually after the speak, if it's speeches, then there is a little mingle opportunity, and then it's easy just to turn to someone and start speaking. Or you can say, then you could maybe say, okay, each week I'm going to add one more person. So if I'm introvert and I want to become more extrovert, I'm going to then add, and next time speak to two, and next time to this way. So I think it's, for me, I stopped going a bit because it takes so much time. But with the ones that we organize, for example, are designed in this way that people are encouraged to exchange, right? That it's more a bit of topic wise, yeah, interesting. But like, for example, we do a lot of events, fun events, like we just did Urban Challenger where we explored Berlin. Like, I try to, when we do events ourselves with me or with Berlin Events Weekly, or I just try to make them in such way that I know that people would feel comfortable, that they can, that basically you encourage exchange between people, because I don't like this style of events where you go and there's three speakers and you just listen there, like, but it's not Bill Gates and Barack Obama speaking. It's usually some, I mean, not gonna say bad speakers, but it's not like everyone there is giving you amazing insights, right? It's not. So I prefer the ones where you have more chance to mingle, but not in the sense of speed dating. But yeah, that you can just talk. And then for introverts, I just say, yeah, just set a goal, speak first to one person, and then increase that. And yeah, also join our events when we have them.
Or do you plan anything in the following weeks?
No, it's nothing that we can. But whatever it will be fun. Yeah, that's at least that's my promise.
Well, let's hope that you're gonna be able to plan something so that I could put it in the description for the podcast. So whoever will listen, they will have an opportunity to learn it from the um, first experience, basically. What about like a daily routines that keep your body awake? You look pretty healthy, by the way.
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, I think good sleep, but good sleep is a big problem. So I started to use sleep mask now. So that's a tip. If you never tried it, you should try it. It really helped me because my apartment is too bright, and I'm really sad that I discovered this so late. So yeah, that's tip number one. And then I have a very clear routine. I try to make sports 5 times a week. I mean, and that's pretty much it. Plus, I really enjoy reading, but this is mostly on my iPad. So I take iPad each morning, I check my inbox, and then I start. And then I'm like, always when I'm reading, I'm thinking about, okay, is this something interesting for handpicked or not? So whatever is interesting, I put it, and then in the backlog, and you never know, like we say in Slovenia, you never know what comes handy in 7 years. So I always store this information, and then I'm also interested in, I read some very good authors and I'm really interested in their opinions. And then, yeah, and then I just get these inputs. So I wouldn't go with these routines like you do a cold plunge and then, like, the CEO routines, like where everyone wants to mimic. I think that's a
Mhm.
load of bullshit. So I think, for me, what works is that, I mean, like, I also have big failures. For example, I had a project after New Year's that I'm gonna spend 2 hours on my phone, because I realized that I'm a lot of times wasting on Twitter, or like just a absolute waste. So we even had a group on WhatsApp about, encouraging each other to keep the phone usage down. But now I just, like, somehow have 5 hours again. I was like, shit. But I mean, it's also okay. You can't be always. I mean, you need to allow yourself sometimes some slack, because maybe something else is more important. So I say, yeah, routines are okay, but you shouldn't. I feel you shouldn't be too strict to yourself with this.
What sport do you do?
I just now do. I found out about the zone 2 running, right, where you run in a very low intensity, and this has been really popular now. It's been all because maybe I watched one YouTube video and then I got so many suggestions. It's basically low intensity training. So I started this now and I'm really enjoying it. So it's running and then I do gym. And I try to play tennis, but tennis in Germany is extremely hard because you need to be a member of the club, which is really strange. So you can't just go, and play. They're gonna say, "Why you're not a member?" So my tennis career is pretty much over. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, um, by the way, random fact, I don't know, every time you check for famous people in Slovenia, a lot of time you get some athletes or sports people. Um, I don't know. It's probably like in your culture to do sporty, but low intensity. Like 2 or 3 years ago, the most hyped fitness word was high intensity. So there was high intensity interval training, high intensity yoga, high intensity this. So the new trend probably low intensity. So we're going through the cycle.
yeah. This is like with fashion, like if 5 years ago you would wear some baggy stuff, like big, like big oversized stuff, people would say this is strange, this is so 90s, and now it's again coming back. So it's the same with all the trends. I think it's the same with this high intensity, low intent. Like it's just, I think you should not look in too much into trends and just do what you like. So I like personally like this low intensity also because you're not tired, right? You can run for 1 hour, and this is so slow that sometimes I'm embarrassed because people are walking and I'm just barely catching up because it takes some time that you build up the base, right? And so, but I don't give, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't give a shit. So just, and then you're not really tired, right? Afterwards, you're still okay. I can still do stuff. If you do high intensity training, you do sprints, you do burpees, you're gonna be like afterwards, just forget it. You can just, I mean, you're not gonna be like, you're gonna be tired. And then sometimes this low intensity is also interesting.
I've got to try it. Well, like my invention is generally just be more active. So instead of uh, this one-on-ones format in a company, probably you have them a lot. I try to change them into, instead of like walk and talk, I do sport and talk. So when we walk around, I encourage people to actually stop, do some pull-ups, and then we continue going. So to introduce some kind of like more activity there, and that's been working pretty out well, because if you have like a couple of one-on-ones which you convert to sport and talk, suddenly you look at your mileage and it's like above average, because
Sorry,
like
so you say now let's do some pull-ups to your one-to-one.
no, no, not now, because we're doing. I encourage everyone to go for a walk, and then
Okay.
we're going in the loops. And in my stations where I normally walk and talk, I already know some places that we could stop and
Ah.
do some pull-ups or dips. And then I say, okay, let's do some pull-ups and dips, just to change the pace of a talk. Engineers love that shit. So at the end of the day, but it's not just with engineers. So because like you have one-on-ones with other departments, normally I believe it's pretty healthy. But now to change back to the original story, um, Igor, what AI tools have you discovered recently and that really help you with editorial research, preparing your um, basically the the structure of your newsletter? Because I believe, I don't know, it looks like a lot of work to find materials, to research trends, and then compare this for Monday. So when it goes out, you actually don't get a lot of unsubscribes, but rather engagement.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use it much, right? So I tried everything. I also in my work I work with AI. We are building chatbots and based on our own trained models. I mean, like for example, if I would use AI to write my snippets, I don't like it at all, right? So what I would need to do, I would need to train. I mean, I have a lot of writing, so I would need to train the model so that it would write similar to me. But this I don't. I mean, I prefer to write it myself. So I use it for small formatting stuff, right? And that's about it. So for research, it's pretty useless because it's hallucinating. So if I use it as a coach, more or less, right? So sometimes when I had ideas to ask, like for example, even if you ask it to write a copy for you, right? Like for marketing, it can just give you, for me, it's just some impulse giver. So I use it as a bouncer for ideas, but I almost never take exactly what it does and paste it somewhere because it's usually, I mean, I use the premium ChatGPT. I understand how it works. I now use Claude. the new one, right, which is much better. So I actually think that it's a lot of hype, right? It's a bit like blockchain, but with much more utility, right? So you can really use it, but it's like a very smart intern. You always need to check after it. You always need to, like, for example, to if I say to ChatGPT or whichever GP or whichever Gen AI, summarize this article, I will not like the summary. I will not. I will never put directly the summary into my, because you mentioned briefly beforehand writing. Like, I feel that art of writing. How, for example, you will notice Chat or AI with words. So Delph is a very common one, and you will also notice that the writing has no tempo, which means that all the sentences are very similar. I mean, it's gonna be readable, but it has no tempo. So if you read a very good book, non-fiction book or fiction book, you will notice that there is tempo in writing. A long sentence, short one. There is, like, the reader will then be much more enjoying it. So I technically could train a model to write like me, but I just don't think it's the effort that I have now time for. So I'm a very big supporter of Gen AI, but I think it's just another hype that will eventually also die off. But with the big difference, it has utility. So you can use it, but you can use it as a very good assistant. That's how I use it as well.
Yeah, this is why they call like we use in GitHub, we use Copilot. So it's not a pilot; it's not like flying for you, but you could basically get your hands off, and it will copilot the airplane.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, I discovered recently Perplexity AI. It's pretty well known. It doesn't invent, it doesn't create like a new Gen AI. It basically utilizes what is already there and makes it in a way that it's very useful. And I love their tool. It's called Discovery. So basically, every morning you just open up this Discovery tool, and it collects some interesting story, very engaging. Like it's mainly like you like they already know that I like science, engineering, and it gives me something like interesting to wake up with. So
So, and your own newsletter then.
I could highly recommend it to you as well. Check it out.
Okay. Okay.
Well, like to finish this off, like you look like you've been reading fiction and non-fiction. So, is there any interesting book that you would recommend to geeks or engineers? We should give it a try and read it.
Yeah, I mean, you really caught me now. So I didn't really prepare myself, but I have one book that I always bought when I was still having interns or as a gift, and it sounds very funny title, but it's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And this is one of the classics from the 1930s, and I remember it teaches you how to be a better colleague, a better person, teaches you about empathy, and the title is very strange. But I was also very skeptical, and then I still remember this story. I opened it, and then the guy says Dale Carnegie or Carnegie. I don't know how it's. Yeah, like, I don't know, probably didn't pronounce it correctly, but he says, "Yeah, you know what? You take a pencil and then you and I was like, "Come on, you're joking, right?" I was really skeptical, but then I started reading, and after 10 minutes, I had my pencil, and I was going with the pen. So yeah, that's one I really recommend, because it's like whenever you return to it, it's just so simple, such a simple book. It's probably one of the most the only self help book that you would need to read. I mean, it's extremely good. So yeah, that's for. I mean, that's nonfiction, I feel. Um,
It's
and for
it's
Yeah,
educational probably.
yeah, it's educational, really cool. And maybe one fiction book that I really liked was Three Body Problem. I don't know if you there's
Oh, I
a
love that. I love that.
yeah
I read them
that's
all. I read them like
yeah
basically in a fly.
yeah
I couldn't stop until I finished the last book. It's a trilogy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's blowing up mind. Like, in the third book you start thinking, "Oh, fuck, I don't even understand what they're talking about," because it's like some high dimensional concept that's very hard to even understand, but very entertaining, very entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Igor, it was a great pleasure having you on this podcast. I'm going to challenge everybody who listened this. Please subscribe to Igor's newsletter. It's very informative, entertaining, humble, and yeah. So, and thanks to this, you at least you know the value of your email now.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks a lot. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.